Hello, everybody. It's me, Casey Katsaris, here, back with some more commentary on shit that people are doing out in the world. And today, I want to talk a bit about Dave Chappelle and his new stand-up special on Netflix called The Closer. And if you're not familiar, it was just released. It's the last installment in a series of stand-up specials that Dave has been doing for Netflix. And again, if you're not familiar, throughout these specials, there's been a lot of controversy around Dave's comments and many accusations of transphobia and just generally being irresponsible with his language and material. As far as my perspective, I've watched all the specials he did. I thought there was lots of really funny stuff throughout. I thought there were some very insightful points here and there, and there were sometimes where I thought some of the backlash was unwarranted on certain topics. And now, at this point, now that his last special is out and I've seen it, I gotta agree with everyone who is saying that Dave is just transphobic. He's just, and maybe that word doesn't resonate with you because it's phobic and people love to get caught up on that and not afraid of trans. So let's just say that Dave is very ignorant, radically ignorant. When it comes to the subject of trans people. If you've ever studied trans theory and the history of the science and the study behind what has gotten us to this point where we know so much more about being trans and the best ways to the best treatments that allow people who are trans to live a happy, fulfilled life that feels authentic to them. If you're not familiar with all that history and all that science, I can see how watching Dave's special, you could just think hey, this guy's just talking common sense. And on the upside, I'll say, first I'll start with the positive, which is that Dave is a genius comedian, absolutely fucking brilliant when it comes to stand-up, when it comes to holding a stage, working a crowd, playing against the audience's expectations. He is truly a master of his craft, as many people have said. And there was a lot of funny stuff in the special, things that I laughed at. And I think one of the issues with when someone is as talented as Dave is at working a crowd and being, very rhetorically effective and shifting people's perspectives, changing their minds, is that you might change their minds in a bad way. And, I think when you're someone who is just like a rhetorical god, the way Dave Chappelle is, responsibility comes with that. I'm always a big promoter of the Spider-Man philosophy of with great power comes great responsibility, because it's very simple and it's always true to me. I think it's a very good rule by which to live one's life. And so in the case of Dave Chappelle, he has huge power, not just as a comedian and a brilliant performer, but he's also super rich and super famous. And though he has to deal with all the racism of being a black guy, he is also a man and straight and gets to enjoy those privileges at the same time. All this to say, all this lead in that, I don't hate Dave Chappelle at all. I've been a big fan of his since high school and seeing Half Baked. I don't think he's some monster or some rat bastard or some, hate-bent maniac who wants nothing more than for trans people to be wiped out or something. Definitely not. And I would say from watching his last special, I feel pretty confident that his heart is in the right place. I don't think he's a bad guy. I just think he has a really weird hang-up around trans stuff and is bizarrely obsessed with it. And if you're going to get obsessed with a topic, maybe study the topic. maybe look into it a little bit, and cool that he had a trans friend and talked to her about it. That's great. Good to have conversations with actual trans people. And, he said in one of his anecdotes about Daphne Dorman, I think that was her name, the trans woman comedian who he knew. He talked about the show he did where she was in the audience and they ended up having a back and forth, and he was asking questions about trans stuff and she was giving him answers. And then at the end of it, he was like, oh, I don't get what you're talking about. I don't understand any of it. And then he shared that she got mad at him and said, I don't need you to understand me. I just need you to believe that I'm going through a human experience. And Dave responded to that. And I think it was probably the most, to me, insightful and worthwhile moment of the show in terms of adding to this trans conversation. Is I think it's really beautiful how he acknowledged that, like, yeah, when she confronted him with that very raw, vulnerable human assertion, that landed with him in a way that saying, like, you're punching down or you're a transphobe did not. So I think there's a really beautiful lesson to be learned there about, about the power of authenticity and vulnerability and just speaking to your real human experience, as opposed to perhaps getting a little lost in specific language, theory, what have you. But besides that moment, like, most of the shit he had to say about trans people, trans community, and trans issues is just again, really, really ignorant, really dumb. In his other specials, I felt like there were things I disagreed with him on, but overall I felt like, he's still this guy who's like pushing the envelope and at least provoking, hopefully, some constructive conversations. But this special, well, I did still, enjoy it as a piece of entertainment, I guess. More than any of the others, it really felt like just like a lame old man, just a lame, out of touch guy ranting at shit that he doesn't understand. And it was a bummer, I think, to see Dave doing that, because again, I think Dave's heart is in the right place. And I think if he could have some conversations with some more informed people, maybe he could change his mind, maybe very easily. But instead, I think the way Dave builds his worldview, and the way a lot of comedians build their worldview, is they just base it all on what material plays when they're out on the road. And it connects to this larger, I think, very dangerous notion that is baked into stand-up culture, in my experience, which is this general idea that, if a comedy club filled with drunk idiots laughs at something, it means it's the truth. And while, many times an audience laughing at something is indicative of at least some kind of root of truth in the material, sometimes you're just performing to a bunch of dumbasses who don't know any better and who are laughing because they don't know shit and they're confused. That does happen. Like, just because a joke works with an audience doesn't mean it's right or good or true. It just means that particular room full of people thought it was funny. And that's a fine way to develop your stand-up set. In fact, it's the best way. If you're trying to, get a tight five together, definitely go try it out at clubs, and whatever works, keep that, and whatever doesn't work, lose it. But when, on the other hand, you're not trying to make a stand-up set as much as you're trying to provide scientific and social analysis, you're going to have to do better than just seeing what the comedy club folk think is acceptable. It's not an effective metric for gauging the quality of your scientific and social analysis, unfortunately. And so, to get a little more specific about Dave's special and some of the things he goofed up, first and foremost, I think, is just that he consistently conflated sex and gender. And this is one of those big things that, like, it seems a lot of you transphobes out there just really struggle to wrap your heads around. Sex and gender are not the same thing. They have often been colloquially conflated throughout history. But gender is made up, is fully made up. It's not a real thing. And what cracked me up, I mean, it's a real experience, it's a concept that humans make real through our the way we construct our society and our social standards and how we engage with each other. Like, that's real. But gender in and of itself is a construct. You know, there are people who are in between sexes. You know, there are people who there are cis women who do not live up to all the arbitrary standards of womanhood that transphobes love. You know, like they'll just say, like Dave said in the special of like, oh, you know, like that basically implied through his comments on Caitlyn Jenner that for a woman to be a woman, like she has to menstruate. And it just doesn't even hold up if you go by cis women. There are plenty of cis women who can't menstruate, who never could. And are you going to reject their womanhood? No, probably. I hope not. But you will when it's a trans woman who doesn't menstruate. Again, like these transphobic arguments just do not hold up to scrutiny. And sex and gender are a separate thing. And it cracked me up when he was saying when he had that joke about oh, we know how trans people love to make up words to win arguments, which I think is one of the most like dangerous things he said, because it could be so easily repurposed by any transphobe to validate and affirm and propagate their transphobia. But what was even funnier about it to me is that literally the only reason there's an argument at all is because cis people made up gender a long fucking time ago. There wouldn't even be an argument. Like, you want to accuse trans people of making up words to win arguments? Accuse cis people of making up words just to arbitrarily categorize humanity towards, I mean, generally it's usually capitalistic ends. But anyway, I don't want to get off track with that. I digress. But anyway, getting a little more on the specifics of dumb stuff Dave said in his special. So he conflates sex and gender. That doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny. And also he you know, he really just went out there and stuck up for J.K. Rowling and her bullshit. And J.K. Rowling is another person I love J.K. Rowling's work. I love Harry Potter. It meant so much to me. Growing up, I read the shit out of those books. I fucking read them out loud to my first girlfriend. Like, I loved that shit. And I'm very sad to see J.K. Rowling saying very stupid things in public. And I'm also compassionate to, like, I get where she's coming from. As a woman who's had to live through being a woman in this misogynistic world, you know, I get what she's trying to get at. And I think Dave was trying to get at it too with that thing of, like, you know, like you, like if a someone who is identified as male at birth and now is a trans woman, you know, that like, oh, like you just got here and you didn't have to live a whole lifetime of being inundated with misogyny. I think there's a good conversation to have there. But the idea that fact then like negates their womanhood, that's where you're off the rails, and it just doesn't it doesn't negate their womanhood. Again, like, it's all made up. Gender is fucking made up. It's not a real thing. It's as phony as race and private property and all these other fucking silly delusions that we as a species are so goddamn attached to. It's just not true. Gender isn't real. And there's no reason to get all upset and weirded out about trans people. And if you're super... and here's the other thing. Like, when... This is where I thought Dave really veered into truly being like a propagandist and spreading misinformation, which is when he framed J.K. Rowling's objections to transness as just like that all she was trying to say is that gender is a fact. And that is a hyper-reductive take on J.K. Rowling's anti-trans manifesto. She was very clear about her concerns that trans women were actually men pretending to be women who would sneak into bathrooms to rape women, and that's why they are identifying as women as a trick so they can rape, which is an intrinsically transphobic assertion and has been made a lot throughout history, and we have the data and the studies to show that this kind of language, this anti-trans rhetoric, translates directly to violence against trans people. This is a fact. Again, study this shit, please. Look at the science. Look at the data. This is all like trans kids are killing themselves at a horrifically disproportionate rate. And so I do think, I am not some big a champion of censorship by any means, and I am a champion of being thoughtful and considerate and thinking about how your words and your statements might impact out in the real world, because they often do. It's not just about hurt feelings. It's another I'd say fallacy in Dave's special was very early on he said, he made the point of like the baby or da baby, I guess, this rapper who said a bunch of shitty, homophobic stuff and then got in trouble for it and lost work for it. He was really sticking up for him and then he pointed out how once the baby killed someone in an altercation, I think it was in a Walmart, and how he didn't get canceled over killing someone, but he gets canceled over hurting gay people's feelings. He did that joke. And first of all, I looked into it, and it turns out that shooting was like a little more nuanced and complicated. He didn't just like march into a Walmart and shoot somebody. It was some kind of altercation, and I, as I recall, he wasn't even the one who shot. Like someone else pulled the triggers. Anyway, the point is, there's a reason why that he didn't get canceled for that. And I'm all for pointing to these weird inconsistencies, I guess, in media coverage. But what was hilarious to me and so hypocritical was that early in his special, he says, oh yeah, so now we get canceled for hurting gay people's feelings. And then at the end, he surprises everyone with the revelation that Daphne Dworman committed suicide. And that it was not long after she was, quote unquote, canceled for defending Dave Chappelle on Twitter. I think he could see that maybe he could be accused of hypocrisy for this, because he puts in a little, caveat of who knows how much that the, Twitter bullying actually contributed to it, and she was probably dealing with other stuff. So he makes a point to not just say they Twitter bullied her to death. Nevertheless, he still presents it as this this affecting, tragic, and he presents it as a point for his argument. Very much so. He's saying see, you cancelers, and it's well, what the fuck? So one second you're saying that it's ridiculous to hold people accountable for hurting gay people's feelings, and then at the end of the special you're trying to hold cancelers accountable for making your trans friend feel bad. So which is it? Is it dangerous to say shitty things in public that might hurt someone's feelings and push them, if they're already in a fragile state, towards suicide? Or is everything on the table and we can joke about whatever we want? Those are two diametrically opposed positions. To claim that you can joke about whatever you want, but also don't joke about Kevin Hart losing his Oscar gig. It's so weird, Dave. Dave, if you ever see this, your priorities are very strange to me. And there's a lot of hypocrisy and contradictions going on in your arguments. And the fact that early in your special, you would make jokes about black people assaulting and killing Asian people at random in the street, that's okay to joke about. But then Kevin Hart losing the Oscar gig, or DaBaby losing a tour or whatever, he lost because of his shitty comments. That's now we got to get serious. Now it's poignant. I just don't get it. And I would support I do think anything can be joked about. If the joke is funny, party on. Joke. I'm very much a proponent of nothing should be totally off limits from comedy, including trans people. And many trans people I've seen have made the point online in the wake of this special that there's plenty of fine stuff you could make jokes about with the trans community. They're humans with these complex, diverse human experiences that you could learn about and speak to. But instead, it just keeps coming back to all right, they're basically just pretending though, right? And it just sucks. They're not again, please study the science. Gender dysphoria is a real thing. And all the treatments that scientists have developed for trans people, be they therapeutic or hormonal or surgical, they've all been shown to work very well for the goal of making trans people feel happy and fulfilled and valid. And that's my goal, and I think it should be your goal too. And if you care more about having the right to make any joke possible than you do about trans kids feeling good enough about themselves that they don't put a fucking gun in their mouth, I think you're an asshole. Like, you just have shitty asshole priorities. And I'm sure there's a whole story behind it of your life experience and the people who you believed, held the truth, and your community's metrics for goodness and badness. And, we're all subject to the way we've been, indoctrinated by our cultures. And I want to be compassionate to that. And also, you transphobes, you got to fucking stop. Please, Dave Chappelle and all of you, study this shit. Study it. Study the science. You sound so stupid when you talk about this stuff without studying it. The entire scientific community has consensus on this. Trans people are valid. If someone is dealing with gender dysphoria, you go to a counselor. A counselor helps you figure out, like, is this legitimate gender dysphoria or is this something else? And then once they confirm that, like, that this is a legitimate example of that, you get your treatments, and then these people feel better. It's something like 97% of trans people who go through, who do the puberty blockers and do the whole process and then transition completely in surgery, like, almost all of them are happy with it. There are a few cases of trans people who end up feeling like they made a mistake. That is a real thing. There are trans people who transition and then they say, fuck, I think this wasn't what I actually meant to do, and then they want to go back. Now, also, among those people that I know of, a lot of them seem to, there seems to be a lot of crossover with them and Christian religious zealots. So maybe a few of those people who are saying, like, oh, I realize I'm actually not trans, maybe it's not so much that they're not trans as much as they're all fucked up from their Christian indoctrination. But anyway, who knows? I can't look inside their brains. The point is, like, almost all of trans people who receive the hormonal and surgical and therapeutic treatment, they love it. It makes them happier. It makes them more, functional in society, and it's all just fucking good. And really, the only people who have a problem with it are idiots who just, like, are really attached to this idea that you have a gender and that it's, like, part of your identity. And like, it is, like, we all have gender, and obviously trans people are fighting to be able to express their gender identity. So, like, identity is a thing, and it's just, gender's made up. This is all made up. And if your issue is with, like, people making up words to win arguments, you should be mad at cis people. You should be mad at straight people. Like, no one has done more making up bullshit to justify bad arguments than, like, cis people and straight people and white people. And men, like, unfortunately. But that's just history. Anywho, I think that's it. So yeah, Dave Chappelle, if you ever see this, I don't think you're a bad guy. And I really believe, because I think Dave's heart is in the right place. I think he and I could sit down and have a conversation. And if I made my points, I think he'd probably agree with me, honestly. I just think he's in a very insulated bubble where most of his understanding on this stuff is coming from, like, casual conversations at comedy clubs, I guess, which is just not a good way to figure out the science of something. And I'll wrap up with this in terms of all this transphobia out there is in one of Dave's earlier specials, he made the joke, the very hackneyed, lame, stupid joke of, like, oh, you identify as a woman? Well, then I identify as a table. Or something. I forget what he said exactly. If it was a chair or whatever. And if you're online a lot, you know that it's been a running joke for many years. I identify as an attack helicopter. This joke to throw in trans people's faces is not a new joke. It's not clever. It's not insightful. It's definitely not hip and edgy. And so to see Dave deliver that joke a few specials ago, and the audience like, ha ha ha, and then all his fans like, amazing. Like, isn't that the cardinal sin of comedians, to make a shitty old hackneyed joke that's been made 1,000 times before and doesn't even speak to truth and is stupid and ignorant? Because here's the thing about that very stupid, dumb joke. Transphobes, listen to me, please. If you get nothing else from this video, please listen to this, transphobic people. Or if you don't think you're a transphobe, someone who objects to trans rights, or you think trans people shouldn't be able to use whatever bathroom, however you want to identify yourself. Genius, amazing genius who sees everything better than anybody else. To all you geniuses out there who have figured out that transness is actually evil and that all the doctors and scientists in the world are wrong. If you take nothing else away from this, all you trans-hating geniuses out there, please understand this, which is that if you ever go to some social event, you meet a new person, and this new person says to you, oh, I identify as a table. And then your reaction to them is something like, no, you are not a table. You are the psycho, not the person who wants to identify as a table. If somebody wants to be a fucking table, let them. What the fuck is wrong with you? Why do you care? If I met somebody and they were like, oh, I identify as a table, I'd be like, cool, table. How's this work? You want me to rest my drink on you? Are you going to get down on all fours? How do we do this thing, Mr. Table or Ms. Table or whatever, or they table? I don't care. Everybody, truly, like, here's my official declaration of the world. Whatever you want to be it. I don't give a shit. If you want to say you're a table, if you want to say you're an attack helicopter, if you want to say you're a fucking, like, a Jello dinner, I don't care what the fuck. Say whatever the fuck you want. Who cares? Just, like, be chill to each other. That's all you got to do. And yeah, if someone saying I identify as a table ruins your fucking day, you're crazy. And of course, like, I don't want to compare someone identifying as a table to a trans person, because it is not the same thing. There's no science to affirm that there is, a table dysphoria, or that, reshaping people's bodies into tables makes them happier. Maybe we'll figure that out, which, cool. Again, like, whatever you want to be, who cares? Chill out. And it's just so weird how Dave Chappelle is so obsessed with this subject and yet didn't bother to study it at all. Like, how can you be so obsessed and fascinated with something and then just not study it at all? It's confounding to me. And to me, the core hypocrisy of the whole special and all these specials that Dave's done and his career is that it staggers me that Dave can realize that, he left Chappelle's show. He shut it down. As he said, he turned down like tens of millions of dollars to walk away from Chappelle's show, specifically because he was concerned that his jokes, his racially charged jokes on that show, might be landing with white people in a way he didn't like, that he was concerned some white people might be laughing at his comedy for the wrong reasons, and that he might be contributing to certain stereotypes, or really just that there might be something dangerous and irresponsible about the kind of comedy he was doing and how it was being translated by the public at large. And so it's so wild to me that he could realize that about his racial material and then commit to that understanding so fervently that he turned down, he left all that money behind and went to do his own thing and went into, seclusion and to reflect and whatever else he did. The fact that he can see that and then turn around and passionately defend his right to say whatever irresponsible, ignorant shit he wants about trans people, when trans people are assaulted and killed at such an insanely disproportionate rate, are killing themselves at an insanely disproportionate rate, and then suddenly he forgets all about being responsible. Like, he made this huge life-changing decision, like, changed the trajectory of his entire existence to stand up for being responsible as a comedian and considering how your language can impact the world in ways you maybe did not intend it to. And then he's just like, but trans material, whatever. I can say whatever I want. And if people get upset or people feel bad, kill themselves, kill each other, well, that's your problem, man. I'm just trying to say what I think. It's just like, dude, how can you not connect those dots? It's astounding. it really is just such an amazing hypocrisy and so emblematic of a colossal blind spot in Dave's brain that he's not clever about this shit. He's not providing valuable commentary. And like at the end of the day, I think any person who is watching Dave's material and really listening to him and really getting what he has to say, I don't think any of those people are going to walk away from these specials and think like, yeah, I should hate trans people or I should beat them up or kill them. Certainly not. I think the overall notion that he pushes out the most is just like, hey, is this kind of thing of like, people can do what they want, but also let me make jokes about it, But that's the issue, is that the same could be said about his racial material. I'm sure most people who watch Chappelle's show, who were smart, educated, who were listening and paying attention, that they would never ever think that that they would get that Dave is, of course, anti-racism and is pushing for black rights. But clearly Dave realized that there were probably some people in his audience who were not getting that. So it's just weird. Like, that would be my number one question to Dave Chappelle is like, why are you concerned about, black people potentially being hurt by your material, but not trans people? Because it really seems like you don't care. And that, like, again, like at the beginning of the special, you'll joke about violence against Asians, but then Kevin Hart, you can't make fun of him. You can't make fun of DaBaby. Or also, the other weird thing is that, like, over the last 5 years, there's been this huge uptick in fascism, in neo-Nazism, the KKK, etc. And, like, Dave's seemingly not really making jokes about that stuff. Like, how is it? You say you're an equal opportunity offender, but then you never make any jokes about right-wingers complaining about being canceled? Like, arguably the most laughable group of humans on Earth right now, like victim complex right-wing crybabies, he's got nothing for them. Nothing. No jokes at all about those people. And like, if being an equal opportunity offender means ignoring the biggest clowns in the room so you can rag on trans people, then don't be an equal opportunity offender, please. Be something else. Because that's really fucking shitty. And it just is, rank hypocrisy to push for all that and then just be completely irresponsible around trans people. It's really weird. And the other thing I'd love to ask Dave Chappelle is how would he feel if he saw a white comedian do several specials in a row where he talked shit about black people, but in a way of like, I love black people. They're great. Of course, they're humans, but also, why are they like this and why are they like that? And they make me uncomfortable. Whatever. It's like, imagine this special from a white comedian. And he did several specials like that. And then people were like, hey, white comedian, this is kind of fucked up. You're saying really shitty, ignorant things about black people. Could you stop? And then that same white comedian did another special and spent almost the entire runtime on this topic and trying to defend his jokes about black people. And then towards the end of the special, introduced the idea that he had a black friend who and his black friend said everything he did was okay. And he just went on and he did a whole thing about his black friend who said his jokes were funny, that his jokes about black people were cool, and that he should keep making them. And he just kept talking about this one black friend who gave him a thumbs up to make jokes about black people. Dave, what would you think of that comedian? Like, would you think they were fucking cool and like telling the truth, speaking truth to power, what the fuck ever, blowing up this cancel culture? Or would you just think they're a fucking racist idiot who's obviously using a token friend to justify their bigotry? Because that's what you did. And of course, that doesn't invalidate your friendship with Daphne Dworman. And clearly it's beautiful and it is a testament to Dave Chappelle's openness that he befriended a trans person and gave her an opening spot on his show. Clearly that does show that it's not as simple as just Dave Chappelle hates trans people. And if anyone's making the argument that just Dave Chappelle hates trans people, period, well, that is a reductive and I don't think accurate argument. The issue is he just has a hang up around trans people. Clearly he's had experiences where he was attracted to a trans woman without knowing she was a trans woman, then discovered she was and didn't really feel comfortable about that. We know for a fact that there's rampant homophobia in the black community. community, and that homophobia feeds in perfectly to transphobia. And so I think that's just what it comes down to. Is like, Dave, you feel weird about trans people. And, I get it with your upbringing and your culture. And also, you're wrong. Your takes on trans people are wrong. And the fact that you are more concerned about cancel culture, which is just too broad and vague a term to mean anything. The fact that you're more worried about cancel culture than you are about rising fascism all around the planet, I just think it speaks to the fact that you're a hyper-privileged, insulated, rich dude. And I'm sorry, but like, Kevin Hart is not the guy to worry about right now. DaBaby is not the guy to worry about right now. Trans kids are in danger. Trans adults are in danger. Black people are in danger. Jewish people are in danger. Asian people are in danger right now. They're being assaulted, killed in the streets. And you want to spend an entire special bitching and moaning and clutching your pearls over trans people daring to criticize your ignorant horseshit? Come on, man. Come on. And to everyone who loved the special and gave it a big thumbs up, stop it. You're not thinking about things. You're not listening. You don't get this shit. Please, please. If you think trans people are not valid, read a fucking book on trans theory. Go on the internet. Study. If you're so fucking concerned about this, dare to actually educate yourself and fucking learn something. Because right now, all you transphobic fucks, you just sound like a bunch of brain jackasses repeating the same tired, debunked arguments over and fucking over again. My God, there was no fucking argument that Dave Chappelle made in that entire special about trans people that has not already been made 100 fucking times before by 100 other fucking idiots throughout history. Please educate yourselves and stop being transphobic. Let trans people live their lives. Let everyone live their lives. Let people be tables if they want to be. Or let people be dinosaurs. Let people be fairies. Who cares? Just let people live their lives and build a fun identity that works for them, and just fucking calm down and leave them alone. And that's it. Just please, transphobes, fucking stop it. Stop it. It's so shitty. And I know chances are most transphobes who watch this, I'm not going to be the one who changes your mind. But hopefully, at the very least, I can at least say to the trans community, I get it. I understand where you're coming from. I have my own queerness that I'm still exploring. I don't exactly perfectly identify with being a cis dude at all. So I feel you. And I'll say in that moment of that I'm sharing, that I have my own, queerness and I questions about how feminine am I, how masculine am I, etc. I think something else on the flip side, to be compassionate to you transphobes, I get that a lot of you some of you transphobes are closeted gay or closeted trans or whatever, and that's like why you're acting out. But I know a lot of transphobes are just like, it seems like really hyper straight dudes and straight women too, obviously with all the TERFs and whatnot. And that was another thing, Dave, to say I'm team TERF. Like, it's just so, you're validating TERFs, and TERF rhetoric, TERF propaganda gets trans people killed. It results in trans death. Don't do it. Anyway, it seems like a lot of transphobes are they're just totally fine. Like, I'm all masculine, I'm all feminine, I'm all straight, I just do my thing. What is all this weirdness? And so I think sometimes in the LGBTQ plus community or just people who support that community, there's a sort of blindness to the fact that it's easier for us, I think, to understand this stuff because we're a little bit in it. Because like if you're a dude who feels a little more feminine than most dudes, like I do, it's easier to embrace all this stuff because it's something that's like providing greater understanding to me, and it's something that means and resonates with me. Whereas if you're just some hyper super straight to the bone heterosexual as fuck dude, I get how you just like, what is this? And it's all weird. So I want to be compassionate to that. that it's easier for, you know, a gay person to understand the gay experience or a trans person to understand, you know, all this stuff than it is for someone who has no personal experience with it. And at the same time, you're still responsible for your actions, and transphobia is still fucking vile, just as much as homophobia was. And really, it's just so disturbing to get to this age where now I've seen these cycles of stupidity fully repeat themselves. And like, I remember when gay people were not as accepted as they are now, back in the 90s, for example, and motherfuckers were making all these same fucking stupid arguments about gay people and why gay people aren't valid and why they're making it up and it's just a choice and it's a mental illness and all this bullshit. And it honestly staggers me and bums me out that we're still on, that now we're doing it again with trans people. How fucking stupid are we as a species? It's so frustrating. We just do the same shit over and over again. And I guess that's why, you know, anyone else out there who feels similar to me, you know, I think it's important for us to develop a certain healthy degree of detachment, because I think it's become, you know, it's abundantly clear that stupid people are going to keep being stupid for at least a while. And that if we're ever going to truly, as a species, climb out of this pit of fucking moronic dumbassery, it's probably going to take a long time. It's probably going to take generations. I hope not. I believe it could be, you know, surprisingly fast. We could make rapid progress as a civilization. And, you know, we have to live day to day. And so if you're like me and you're just very frustrated with constantly seeing stupid people make stupid arguments in public, I feel you. And it sucks. It does suck. And you know, just hang in there, keep speaking smart things, speak up in public, do what you can to balance out the scales of the discourse and move it a little away from just being totally ruled by fucking dummies. And yeah, so I think that's it. Transphobia, stop it. Dave Chappelle's new special, not very good, very ignorant, confused, filled with hypocrisy and contradictions. And yeah, Dave, if you ever see this, let's have a conversation or talk to more trans people, more than just the one trans comedian who thought you had the permission to do whatever you wanted. Maybe consider some other trans perspectives in addition to your biggest trans fan. Yeah, that's it. And good luck out there, everybody. I love you all. I wish you all the best. Let's be chill to each other. Stop being transphobic. See you later. Bye.